Alrighty, Jake here with TrendSpider. Hopefully everybody had a good trading week. The markets definitely had a good week with some huge moves, especially in the S&P 500. And we'll start with SPY on the broad market recap, looking at the daily versus the weekly. And you can see here on the daily chart, we were looking at this resistance trend line last weekend in the previous update. And you can see that we moved up right to this area and actually closed through it, almost closing right at that 412 area into the week ahead. Now, on the weekly side of things, you can see that this ascending wedge is starting to form. And really, if price continues to move up, we could easily test this 420 to 4. I'd say around, if we went straight up next week, I'd say 420 would be the target above, at least for this resistance. So if this would be a target for you to watch, or you want to watch anywhere around this line, you can always use an alert with that sensitivity, which allows you to have a buffer area around the exact trend line that you're focusing on. So in this case, you could make it as big as you want. Choose either if the price touches anywhere within this purple area, or if it actually only breaks through. You don't really need the sensitivity, you just need to know when the price actually breaks through that line. So that is a great way to get ready for the week ahead if you did want to create alerts on these lines. Now, going into the Qs, we can see here that we did have quite a move up as well. However, we did not break these previous all-time highs. So I set an alert here going into next week. If we did break through this area, that would be a pretty crucial area to break through. Another thing too is if we anchor the volume by price from this March low, you can see that we really blasted off through this volume shelf here from late March, early April. And this is just a great example of how the volume shelf can really act as a launch pad for price. I mean, the price has gone literally straight up since March 31st. Now, on the weekly side of things, we're going to look at the monthly Bollinger Band. So I click on MTFA, change this to monthly, and let's turn off the Bollinger Band there. And then add it on the weekly. So we'll do Bollinger Band monthly. And you'll see here that this Bollinger Band to the upside is right around 354, 355, depending on how long this takes to move up. And you can see here that there is plenty of room to move up, considering that this has been an area where prices at least calmed down a little bit. But you can see back in August, we broke right through this line. So all in all, on the monthly Bollinger Band side of things, looking on the weekly chart, there's plenty of upside left shown by this area. You can always go and create an alert on the upper Bollinger Band, just like you can on a trend line as well. Going into IWM, you can see here that we do have a little bit of a different story here. We did pull back after this alert triggered last week. You can see that I had this trend line alert right at the resistance line here. And you can see that we technically broke through, but pulled back almost immediately. And that would have been a good time to start looking at the market and see if there was any weakness there. So this is a great way the alerts really help with getting an idea of what's happening without having to stare at the chart all day. Now, if we anchor the volume by price from this March low, you'll see here that we did form a base right where a lot of this volume is holding. So this is definitely an area where supply is drying up, and there's definitely people buying here, as you can see that the price is holding. And then on top of that, you can see on the monthly Bollinger Band side of things, we are right at the upper monthly Bollinger Band here. And if we anchor the volume by price, take the Bollinger Band off and add the weekly volume by price, and let's anchor it from this pivot here in September, you'll see that we moved up right into this supply zone above. So you can see here, right into this area was where we were rejected. You can see here, if you bought at 224, dealt with a drawdown to 208, you may take some off the table once we get back up here, and that's where that supply is coming from. So rejected the supply on the weekly, starting to form a little bit of a base on the daily, but still nowhere near the type of move that we saw for SPY or the Qs. Going into the VIX is definitely one that continues to just move down. We're down 48% from the March highs, early March highs. And we actually are down a little lower, considering Friday did have a little bit of a lower move here. So 48.28% from the very high to the very low over the last 1 month and 6 days. And you can see here as well, if we turn on the gap snake, you'll see that we have filled this gap. Let's do MTFA off. Turn on the gap here. You can see that this gap is clearly filled. And what I'm using here is called the gap snake. That's just the automated gap detection. And you can see we've clearly filled that gap below. And, you know, what's interesting is the fact that we really didn't hit a really noticeable new low here from Thursday's open. So you can see here that with the market ripping like it did today, I did this video on Friday, you can see that you would expect this to really move down more with the market moving up like it did. So that's something to consider going into the week ahead, that we really didn't make too much of a new low from Thursday's low, which was essentially the open on Thursday. So keep that in mind going into the week ahead. And then going into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a great example of, kind of getting into that broad market side of things with risk on, risk off. I mean, IWM a lot of the time is looked at as the risk on, risk off asset class or index to look at, but Bitcoin as well. I mean, if we anchor the volume by price from the start of this ascending triangle, we have a clear ascending triangle on the daily chart. You can see that we did really bounce right at this volume shelf, which is kind of textbook what we'd expect. And then on the weekly side of things, I mean, literally for the last 2 months, 1.5 months, this 5.618 extension from the 2019 highs. So this is the first measured part of the measured move. This is the second part of the measured move. And you can see here that I just measured the move here, and then the extension show up to the upside. And this 5.618 extension is also a psychological number. That's the 60K mark here. So not only a fib extension level, but also that psychological point here that price is just really having trouble getting through that 60K here on Bitcoin. Now, Ethereum's a little bit of a different story. We still have a similar setup, but instead this is more of an ascending wedge here, and you can see that we are kind of trying to break through, but we also have a lot of room to the downside. If we start the volume by price and measuring what the ascending wedge volume profile looks like from the start here on January 10th, you'll see we have quite a bit of volume below. So if we did start to break down, this area around 1800 would be an area where supply could possibly start drying up, as this is where a lot of I was going to call them shares, but we're looking at crypto at this point. So this is where a lot of holders of Ethereum would be back to break even from that point here on January 10th, measuring from that area. Now on the weekly side of things, you can see that we are now actually at the 7.618 extension for Ethereum compared to the 5.618 extension on Bitcoin, and we have the same measured move from the 2019 highs down to the 2020 lows, and this is literally almost a perfect area that the price has now tested 2 weeks in a row and has been rejected so far. We'll have to see if that continues into the weeks to come. And then on to some individual names. So the first one is Facebook, and Facebook's a really interesting one here, mainly due to that weekly Bollinger Band on the daily chart. So click MTFA. We're looking at the daily chart right now, but if we overlay the weekly Bollinger Band, notice what happens anytime the price gets outside of this upper band. You'll see here that we did have this same type of move in August. What happened? We went straight through that upper band and then literally crashed right back down, and that seems to be exactly what's happening right now. I mean, we'll have to see what happens going into the week ahead. There's no time in the market where anything's going to correlate exactly how it did in the past. However, this is something to note that we are pretty far above that weekly Bollinger Band. But remember, Bollinger Bands are flexible. They can just move up with price. But for now, we did have a little bit of a blip here in late March where we had a move up and then pulled back. So we'll have to see if that continues into next week, or we just continue to ramp up into the 320s or so. Now, on the weekly side of things, if we anchor the volume by price from the COVID lows, you'll see another example of the launch pad here created by the volume shelf. So you can see here if we start the volume by price, which is essentially measuring where all of these shares are holding at different price levels. Remember, if you're looking at volume as a function of time, it's going to be at the bottom of the chart. We're measuring each week, and we're measuring how much volume occurred on each week. On the right-hand side here, on the y-axis, we're actually measuring volume since the bottom here in March. Where are a majority of shares holding, and where have they occurred, at least those transactions? So in this case, most of those shares are holding right around 270, and you can see over the last couple weeks, this area initially acted as a little bit of a supply zone as the price was below it, and then once the price got above it, it really acted as a launch pad for price and a base for price to move up off of. So that's Facebook. Going into FUBO, you can see here that FUBO is one that finally started to move. A couple different things to keep in mind here. If we anchored the volume by price from the swing high, we had this huge volume shelf forming here as well. This is something we were pointing out a couple times this week. And you can see here that just there was a ton of shares holding here. And then finally, we got a little bit of a news event, which helped the price move up off this base and into this volume gap above. So remember, a volume gap is just an area where we don't have a ton of liquidity above. We didn't get all the way up to that anchored VWAP above, which is essentially a handoff anchored VWAP, or almost a handoff, anchored VWAP from the March 2nd, but it is a pivot. So you can see here, this is why that anchored VWAP is there. You could also anchor from this pivot as well, and you'll see that we did more or less respect this one this time around. So all in all, FUBO definitely finally got some type of move here. And one thing with FUBO is a lot of people are talking about, oh, FUBO's dead, whatever. Well, if you look at FUBO over the last year and a half, FUBO is hitting higher lows consistently. And so, yes, we've pulled back, but you can also see that we're still much higher than we were back in 2019. And we've consistently hit these higher lows. Now, this hasn't proven itself as a higher low that's going to stick until we move to the upside. But for now, it is holding as a higher low, and we're right on this this potential trendline support here going into the week ahead. Going into Tesla. This is one that really has had some hard time breaking through, some trouble breaking through this volume shelf here. And you can see that we have the volume by price anchored from this swing high here. And you can see a majority of shares are holding right here. The price initially had trouble breaking through it last week, and then we pulled back, and now we're kind of hanging out right on this area, which is now acting as a potential level that price is consolidating at. And if we add the Ripster moving average clouds, you can see here that we are right in confluence with this cloud here. So not only do we have the volume shelf, but we also have this moving average cloud here as well. Now on the weekly side, I just kept it simple, and I added just two trend lines here to create more or less of this symmetrical triangle forming a pretty ugly weekly candle, I have to say. Not the greatest. And essentially what this gray candle means is it essentially means that we still closed above last week's close, but the open was way up at 710 or so, and the close was way down here at 710 open. Close was at 675 or so. And so it's still gray because we closed above last week's close, but we closed below this week's open. And so it's like looking at a window shade, and we're closing that window shade because the close of the week is lower than the open, and that's where we get this type of candle. So all in all, going on to the sidebar real quick, we'll look at the seasonality side of things, and you can see here that April has an 83% win rate since the 2016 lows. So April is historically a pretty strong month. If we look at the monthly chart real quick, you can see here that we are starting to try and move up a little bit, but for now we're kind of stuck right in this area. But there's still plenty of time left in the month. There's still 3 weeks left in the month of April, so that's something to consider as well. But you'll look, if we go into May, May is historically not a great month. So keep that in mind when you are possibly going long into April with this strong month showing. May does drop off quite a bit and is actually only a 40% win rate since 2016. That means that 40% of the time May has closed higher than April's close. Going into PLTR, PLTR was a great example of really just the supply zone shown by the anchored volume by price over the last couple days, or really even a week at this point. So if we anchor the volume by price from the swing high here, you'll see that we have just a ton of supply above, and the price has really had trouble breaking through this area. And so you can see here that until we really get through, let's say, this 2550 area, the price is really going to have a hard time getting through the supply. You'll see here if we anchor a VWAP from this IPO, you'll see that we did not close above this anchored VWAP. So a couple things here to keep in mind. We're still below the volume weighted average price from the IPO, and we are still very much trying to get through the supply zone above. Same thing with PLTR, except we can't really say much about it because it hasn't been around long at all. So you can see here, let's look at the day of the week. And this was a good case study going into Friday. So Friday just actually had a slight uptick in the win rate. Before it was 58%, now it's 62%. And the reason is because Friday had a green close. But you can see how much stronger Friday is than the other days of the week so far in 2021, shown by the seasonality on TrendSpider. So just a great way to look at each day of the week and see, do I have any edge on the historically seasonal side of things, with Wednesday definitely being a pretty rough day. And you'll see that, Wednesday definitely was a red day, and you can see the seasonality increases Thursday and Friday, and we did have 2 green days into the last 2 days of the week. Now, if you did want to be alerted whenever the price breaks through this anchored VWAP, just right click, just like we did before. Anytime the price breaks through, touches, or bounces around this area, you'll be alerted. Make sure to change your confirmation candle to the lowest time frame possible so you get that alert as quick as you can, and you can easily set these alerts, let price action do its thing, and then you don't have to go and stare at charts all day, and you can live about your life. Last one is TIGR. TIGR is one that really had a pretty strong move into the second half of the week. You can see here that we do have this anchored VWAP tested almost perfectly. This is where the the sensitivity, not the seasonality, really comes into play here, because you can see that we didn't actually touch this anchored VWAP above, but the price actually touched within this purple area, and that's what made the alert go off. Anytime that the price got anywhere within this purple area and the 10-minute candle closed in this area, that's when you'd get the alert. So you don't have to be right on the money with these alerts. You can be even, let's see, in this case, it was the anchored VWAP was at 20. We were down around 19.93. So literally almost $1 off this anchored VWAP, and you can still get the alert that we're getting close. And then if we anchor the volume by price from the lows here that we saw way back in COVID, the COVID lows, you can see that we do have this volume shelf forming. Nice bounce off here. Notice that last week this area acted as a supply zone, and then this week we finally got through it. So if you just remember what we talked about on PLTR, we could easily see this type of move where initially this acts as supply, but then we actually move up through that. So going into the month of the year seasonality, going back since pretty much March of 2019, not a ton of data here to go off of, but April does have a 100% win rate over the last 2 years. So keep that in mind. Not a ton of data to go off though, so also keep that in mind that this is only about 2 years worth of data. But all in all, a pretty strong setup going into the week ahead. And this concludes the weekend update. If you guys have any questions, always reach out to us either through our Twitter DMs or hello@trendspider.com, or you can comment on this video below and we're happy to answer your questions there. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. We are in the break time, I guess you can call it, for the season 4 trading pit. So that starts here in, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. So for the next couple weeks, we will be doing these weekend videos, and then we'll get back into the stock trading pit, starting with the season 4, I think, in early May or mid-May. And we'll get back to those. So anytime those premiere, you'll get a notification if you're subscribed to the TrendSpider platform, the TrendSpider YouTube channel. And as I mentioned, if you do want to subscribe to the TrendSpider platform and get access to all of these tools, we do have a 7-day free trial. And as I mentioned, we're always happy to answer any questions, and we do have those one-on-one demos so you can answer or ask any questions and get those answered for you by one of our team members at TrendSpider. So thank you all for watching. Hopefully everyone has a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.